Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us in the summertime. Hope it's a lovely day wherever you are. It's a lovely day here in La Jolla. This is Jeremy Martin, Vice President for Energy and Sustainability at the Institute of the Americas, and we're delighted to continue with our 2017 Energy Webinar Series here at the Institute of the Americas. And today we'll be talking about renewable fuels, and we've titled this webinar Why Renewable Fuels, an Economic Environmental Assessment. And I'd like to thank for the continued support of these webinars and our webinar series, Intercap Energy Systems. So for those of you who've joined us before, I think by now you are familiar with the outline and agenda that we'll follow for the webinar. So I'll make a short introduction, and then we'll have a main presentation today by Cynthia Obadia. And then we'll have a question and answer session at the end, and depending upon how much time we have, get to your questions. And just as it comes to the questions, a logistical reminder, we use the chat function. So just simply use the chat bar at the bottom there, type your question, hit return, and it will pop up in the chat area. And that's how we'll proceed for the question and answer session. Please feel free throughout the course of the presentation to pose your questions via the chat function. We'll wait to the end. We'll wait till after Cynthia concludes her formal presentation to go to the Q&A, but that doesn't mean you can't pose a burning question throughout the course of the presentation. In fact, I would encourage you to do so that we can jump right to the questions at the Q&A period. So I would like to now introduce Cynthia, and Cynthia is somebody I've known for several years, and she's a rare species here in this area in that she's a Latin American energy guru and somebody from the region and somebody who has worked for many years on energy issues, especially in Latin America. She's primarily an energy trading professional, but now she's working as a consultant for biofuels producers, and her goal in doing that is to maximize financial incentives from California's carbon regulations, as well as the Environmental Protection Agency, so at the federal level in the United States, the Renewable Fuels standards. And that's something we'll get into a good bit today, the California and then the federal standards here in the United States. Her consulting practice today focuses on working with biogas producers and consumers, both in the transportation but also power generation sectors. And she also works closely with Argus Media, supporting their business development here on the west coast of the U.S. And prior to consulting, as I mentioned, Cynthia spent several years as an energy trader at Shell, Goldman Sachs, and Petróleos de Venezuela, better known as PDVSA. And time permitting at the end of the Q&A, I don't want to hijack the renewable fuel discussion with the Venezuela conversation, but time permitting at the end, I would like to pose a couple questions to Cynthia, given her experience and understanding and time working on issues in the Venezuelan market, and to see what her thoughts are on Venezuela. But first, without any further ado, let's talk renewable fuels. And the idea here, just to make a final comment, the idea here is, given Cynthia's experience in the California and United States market, and as countries in Latin America proceed to bring online renewable fuels and incorporate renewable fuels, whether it be in the transport sector or in the more broad electric sector, the energy sector, we thought it would be particularly interesting to, indeed, as the title says, have sort of a conversation on the economics and environmental elements of renewable fuels here in California, as well as the United States, and how those lessons and some of the legislation and policy environment can inform similar developments and similar policy discussions in the region and across Latin America. So with that, I will turn it over to Cynthia to take us through these issues here in the United States and California. Cynthia, thanks again for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Jeremy, for that introduction. And I'm so glad to be here speaking to you all about biofuels or renewable fuels. Both names are interchangeable. And why are we talking about this topic? And I wanted to highlight that basically there has been an increase in the last 5 years, 19% of the U.S. Of the consumption of biofuels, and in California it's 40%. So this is why it is an important issue in the energy energy markets, in the petroleum products market, and how they're making an inroad in supplying fuels and changing the the way that the transportation fleet is fueled in this country. So why a focus on biofuels? Why is the U.S. Focused on biofuels? Why is California focused on biofuels? Well, in the U.S., basically, transportation constitutes 27% of GHG emissions, and in California is 39%. In the U.S., it's second to the electric generation. In California, it's the top sector producing GHG emissions. So that's why there's a focus on these on the transportation fleet and trying to minimize the emissions, the GHG emissions from these fuels. I also wanted to focus on what is the definition of renewable fuels or biofuels. Is biofuels produced from biological process as opposed to a geological process. That's the fossil fuels. So, renewable, it could be, agricultural, food, anything that is a biological fuel. So let's go to the next slide. And basically, what I wanted to say, the growth I described in fuels is mainly due and has been financed by incentives from federal program called the Renewable Fuel Standard, or RFS, as we'll call it going forward. And in California, it's called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, or Lcfs. Basically, if you're a biofuels producer or a renewable fuels producer, you will receive, if your fuel is consumed in California, you will receive the incentive from the federal as well as from the California programs. So those financial incentives are significant, and they have helped spur the growth in consumption and availability, production and consumption of these fuels. So what are the difference between the two programs? They're pretty similar, but there are definitely some differences. The federal program, the fuels are sold only applicable. The incentives are received for fuel sold in the United States. In California, only fuel sold in California. The federal has a target. The RFS was designed. The goal is to reduce to have 36 billion gallons blended into the transportation fuels pool by 2022. Whereas in California, the target was 10% cut in carbon intensity of on-road transportation fuels by 2020 from 1990 levels. So they're comparing 1990 levels, and by 2020, the carbon intensity of all transportation fuel needs to be 10% lower. And we'll talk more about what is carbon intensity and all that. The RFS program has specific targets for each fuel. For ethanol, for biodiesel, for advanced fuels, there's a target for each fuel, whereas in California, it's fuel neutral. It's whatever fuel has the lower carbon intensity will receive more Lcfs credits, and then therefore they will receive more incentives. In the federal program, they do not count natural gas into the CNG and LNG fleet, only biogas, whereas in California, biogas into the CNG and LNG fleet also are included, or receive credits, shall we say. And also electric and hydrogen vehicles are included in the California program. The other difference is that the instrument that is used to track the incentives, the federal program, they're called RINs, Renewable Identification Numbers. Basically, they track how many credits our obligated parties have to buy or have to have. And that's how they're tracked. And in the California market, they're called Lcfs credits. Now, what do the programs have in common? The obligated parties are entities that produce or import transportation fuels. These entities can meet their obligation either by blending renewable fuel into their pool. For example, in the United States, pretty much 10% of the gasoline that we purchase at the pump is made up of ethanol. 10% is ethanol. So they could blend ethanol. Some states, there are some regions in the United States where ethanol blends are higher, and even in California, ethanol blends could go up to 85%, the E85 fuels. So that's one way that obligated parties can meet their obligation. The other way is by purchasing RINs or Lcfs, just purchasing the credits themselves from renewable fuel producers, which they can either sell the fuel, the renewable fuel producer can sell the fuel, or they can also sell the RINs and Lcfs credits to obligated parties. So in order to do this, the renewable fuel producer has to opt into the program because they are not part of the program to begin with. So they both are very similar in that way. So how did the differences in the two programs translate in the types of fuels that are consumed? If we look at, this is 2016 data, if we look at in the US, it's hard to read in that slide, but basically in the US, 83% of the fuel is ethanol. In California, only 72% is ethanol. Biodiesel in the US is 13%, California is 7%. Renewable diesel, we'll talk a little bit about the difference between biodiesel and renewable diesel, is 3% in the US, but it constitutes 11% in California. And then you have some items that don't even show up in the US chart, such as bio CNG, LNG. Here I'm talking about biogas or renewable natural gas, or fossil CNG, LNG, and also the electric and hydrogen vehicle. So then the difference between these is because the California program is driven by the carbon intensity. So immediately, lower carbon intensity fuels are consumed and receive more credits, and therefore have a greater amount of financing, and therefore have a greater rate of adoption. Whereas in the federal program, it says it sets how many gallons for each category. So let's go to the next slide. Let's talk a little bit about what is the RFS. It was passed by Congress in 2005 and expanded in 2007 under the Energy Independence and Security Act under George W. Bush. Yes, a Republican. You guys may be surprised, but it is a Republican regulation. And the objectives were reduce dependence on foreign oil, reduce GHG emissions, and as well as promoting jobs in the green sector. Imposed a renewable volume obligation on obligated parties, and like I mentioned before, requires 36 billion gallons to be blended, which is about expected to be about 16% of the total of the fuels consumed. Now, the EPA can modify the RVO depending on biofuel supply availability. So they have been doing so since the beginning of the program, because not what the goals were set at, which are here in this slide. These are the goals that were set at originally in the regulation. They have not been met. For example, for 2017, the goal was 24 billion gallons. And actually, the EPA set the goal last year at 19.28 billion. Why is that? Because, for example, the amount of advanced biofuels are fuels that reduce emissions by 60% or more. Basically, there isn't enough supply of advanced biofuels. The technological developments in that area have not gotten to the point of producing the volumes that were set originally by this regulation, and therefore the advanced biofuel target is 4.28 versus 9, like you see there. And cellulosic fuels also, they were set at 5.5 and really 5.5 billion gallons, and the real target or the real RVO is 311 million gallons. So to give you an idea how much smaller it is in terms of the fuel availability. So what about the California program? Well, became regulation in 2006, AB 32. The goal was to reduce emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. And so CARB, the California Air Resources Board, in order to achieve this, basically implemented the following programs. The low carbon fuel standard, which is what we're talking about. Cap and trade, which I'm sure you may have heard about. It's a bit of a controversy right now in Sacramento. The California Renewables Standard, which is targeting power sales. 33% of power sales in California have to come from renewable sources by 2020. And other programs such as zero emission vehicles, high speed rails, and many other programs that work together towards achieving the goal of reducing emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. In last year, SB 32 was extended the term because it was initially just going to end in 2020. Now it's been extended to 40% reduction of emissions below the 1990 levels by 2030. So you have significant challenges and work that California has to do to achieve these targets. It is also worth to mention that Oregon Lcfs program, which is designed very similar to California's program, took effect in January of this year. So we'll start seeing some incentives. We've already started seeing some incentives being basically received by biofuels producers who sell fuels in Oregon. And British Columbia also has an Lcfs program started in 2010. So little by little, there are other areas of the U.S. that are adopting these programs. So how has California's program been effective? And you can see from this slide that basically as of last year, as of 2016, we have seen a 2.63% reduction in fuels from the 1990 levels. And the target, of course, is 10% from 1990 levels. And so you can see how this curve is going to get a lot steeper very quickly. And there's going to be a greater adoption of biofuels in California, pushed by this very steep curve that is required by law. So what is carbon intensity? Because this is all measuring the carbon intensity of fuels. In the next slide, basically, here I'm going to the next slide. Yeah, carbon intensity is calculated on the fuel life cycle. This is an example. For example, what is the fuel life cycle or the carbon intensity of corn ethanol? Well, you've got the emissions from farming corn, but also you have emissions from land use change. For example, if it was a forest and then it was, taken down to basically plant corn, that has a sacrifice or an emission cost, which goes into that. Then the ethanol is transported to a biorefinery. And that has emissions itself, the transportation. The biorefinery, the process itself has emissions. Now, the biorefinery produces a co-product or a fertilizer, and that gets a positive. Well, it's negative there, but basically it's a reduction in the total, because the higher the carbon intensity, the more emissions it generates, of course. So this co-product or fertilizer, it goes to replace chemical fertilizers, and therefore it reduces the carbon intensity of the fuel. And then from the biorefinery, it's transported to the gas stations and are then burned by the vehicles, and that itself has emissions. So, for example, corn ethanol, Midwestern corn ethanol can have a CI between 73 and 121 grams per megajoule. That's the way that it's calculated. So basically, you can see that because of the calculation of the CI of the fuels, in California, we have seen a change in the mix of biofuels that are consumed. Ethanol consumption has reduced as a percentage of the total fuels, but actually in gallons, the consumption of ethanol has stayed the same or gone up, actually. But as a percentage of the total fuels, it has gone down. And we have seen a growth in areas like renewable diesel, which is the orange, biodiesel also, biomethane, what I was talking about, biogas into CNG and LNG. Natural gas has also seen a growth, and electric vehicles show up here also. So basically, you see this growth happening, incentivized again by the carbon emission reduction, the carbon intensity of the fuel. So let's go to the next slide. This slide, one of these bubble slides, they basically have each color is a different fuel, and you can see the range of carbon intensity for each fuel. And the greater the bubble means the greater in volume of fuels that are sold in California of that particular carbon intensity. So let's focus on ethanol, which is the bottom, the pink bubbles in the bottom. And you can see that basically they go all the way as low as 40s. Well, there's an outlier there in the in the 20s, carbon intensity of 20s, all the way to 80, 90s carbon intensity. And basically, for example, Brazilian sugarcane is a carbon intensity of 40. Your regular corn ethanol produced in the Midwest, like we said, is about 87 carbon. That's the carbon intensity. California produced corn ethanol with 100% powered by biogas, for example, has also a carbon intensity of 50. So again, you're incentivizing not to use grid electricity, but use biogas for electricity production, and that reduces the carbon intensity of the fuel. So what's happening is that we're seeing a lot of imports of ethanol from Brazil into California, incentivized by both the RFS and the Lcfs credit. And the United States exports a lot of Midwestern corn ethanol of a higher CI to Brazil when basically ethanol supply in Brazil is low because maybe sugar prices are higher, and therefore Brazilian ethanol producers rather produce sugar than ethanol. So from the sugar cane. So that's all these factors are driving the trade, between here in the United States and Brazil. And looking at California's program, yes, it does have a cost. It does have a cost. Gasoline taxes in California are 58% higher than the national average. You have basically 4.3 cents a gallon from the Lcfs program, and you have 12 cents a gallon from the cap and trade program. And that is about 22% of all the total taxes of fuels in California. So there is a cost for having clean fuels. I did not want to leave that out of our discussion. Now let's talk a little bit about biodiesel and renewable diesel. You can see that the picture is different when you look at the U.S. as a whole and California consumption. Of course, biodiesel consumption has increased significantly. It's more than 2 billion gallons in the United States as a whole. But in California, we have seen renewable diesel to have a greater consumption rate than biodiesel. And why is that? First of all, what is the difference between biodiesel and renewable diesel? Biodiesel is renewable diesel is like they're both coming. They're not fossil fuels. They're made for non-petroleum products, renewable resources such as natural fats, vegetable oils, and greases. But renewable diesel it is molecularly exactly like the fossil diesel, and therefore is what we call in the business drop-in fuel. So you can substitute molecule to molecule renewable diesel for fossil diesel. So same chemical structure, whereas biodiesel needs to be blended because it tends to gel at low temperatures, and therefore the blend rates of biodiesel into diesel vary a lot from the summertime to the wintertime, depending on the state, where the diesel is being dispensed. That's one reason why we have seen an increased adoption in California. The other reason is because many cities in California, such as San Francisco, Oakland, San Diego, they have basically adopted the policy of consuming renewable diesel in their fleets as a way, it's an easier solution. It's a drop-in fuel. You don't have to worry about blending. It's just a simple substitution. So that's why we're seeing that about half, 250 million in 2016 of the renewable diesel consumed in the United States was actually consumed in California, and it's imported. The renewable diesel is 100%. Last year was 100% imported from Singapore into California. So that is an interesting different kinds of fuel. Now let's talk a little bit about biodiesel. Just last week, last week, there's been a trade war declared against U.S. imports of Argentinian and Indonesian biodiesel. Basically, the National Biodiesel Board filed a petition against Argentinian and Indonesian companies claiming that they are violating trade laws because they're flooding the U.S. market with subsidized biodiesel. In 2016, biodiesel imports rose to a record of 960 million gallons, and Argentina represented about 2/3 of that. And the imports were about 3 times more than in 2015, or about 21% of the biodiesel consumed in the United States. So no wonder U.S. producers are not too happy about that. Basically, the EPA approved Argentina's registration under the RFS in January 2015, and since then they've been sending a lot of biodiesel here to the U.S. So it's kind of an interesting development in terms of the impact on trade. The other fuel that's very interesting that has grown significantly is renewable natural gas, going into CNG and LNG fleets. So you could call it bio-CNG, LNG, or renewable natural gas has grown incredibly, as you can see from this chart. And the reason is due to the RIN and Lcfs credit. Actually, in the federal program, remember we were talking about the different categories of fuel. Renewable natural gas qualifies as a cellulosic fuel. So that means that basically you're seeing the RIN that is generated from there is very valuable because as I had mentioned earlier, the cellulosic target is only 311 million for 2011, whereas the regulations require us a target of basically it was like 5.5 billion. So we're way below what the targets are. So this fuel, our RNG does qualify for it, and that's why you can see here how much it's grown. And in California attracts 85% of all the RNG that's sold in the United States, mainly because they receive both the RFS, the RIN credit, as well as the Lcfs. Now, where does, oh, in California, I wanted to show you this. In California, actually, RNG has exceeded natural gas in the CNG and LNG fleets. You can see here how much they have exceeded. And RNG is one of the components, is an ultra low carbon transportation fuel and fueling a new generation of medium and heavy duty natural gas vehicles. So basically, they're near zero emission vehicles when you burn in a CNG, LNG engine, CNG or LNG trucks when you burn renewable natural gas. And I suspect that this is also happening in the United States as a whole, not as such a fast rate because, again, you have in California the incentive of the Lcfs credit. And where is the RNG coming from? Well, it's basically a waste-to-energy fuel. RNG is produced from methane emissions collected from landfills, wastewater treatment plants, and anaerobic digesters. 57 RNG projects are online today in the United States. Actually, 2 of these are in Canada, but they're supplying RNG to the United States. 76% of the RNG produced goes into the transportation market and 24% to the power sector. What is the future of it? Well, it's growing fast, very fast. 24 new projects under construction, which are expected to, so production is expected to triple by 2018 to 541 million gallons, so triple from 2016 levels. So that's significant. And 87% is expected to go to the transportation market, and enough to displace 15% of the diesel consumption in California. So that's pretty significant. So let's talk a little bit about electric vehicles. California Governor Brown's goal is to have 1.5 electric vehicles on the road by 2025. However, as you can see from this this chart, basically only in California we have seen about 300,000. So we have a long way to go. And national sales are about 600,000 vehicles. So as of basically March, cumulative to March of 2017. Basically, National Resource Defense Council study published earlier this year found that it's unlikely that California is going to meet Governor Brown's target. Basically, there's an issue with the incentives. The incentives are not enough to cover and to be able to, enter the market. And another thing California has done has mandated that all transit agencies switch to electric buses by 2040. But the transit agencies are fighting it because a lot of them have committed to biogas, and such as LA Metro recently committed to that. So they're not too happy about having to convert their fleets again by 2040 to electric vehicles. So let's talk a little bit about the credits, Lcfs and the RINs. They are very volatile, as you can see from this chart. Basically, these credits cannot be hedged. There is no long-term fixed price market for these credits, and therefore producers of biofuels who count on these credits basically, have to cross their fingers that the credits that they expect will be coming in, and the pricing of the credits will basically be enough to finance their projects. But obviously, again, we have seen that growth of production. So the programs are working. That's what you can say. But there is volatility, and that is a big hurdle to further development, especially as you saw the California carbon intensity curve getting a lot steeper. Is California going to meet those targets? Are we going to be able to meet those targets here with the biofuel that can be produced? And the credits is the big answer to that question. Are the credits going to give the producers enough money so they can produce these fuels. So in summary, incentives from RINs and Lcfs have been key in promoting growth. Expect additional incentives coming from Lcfs programs in Oregon and British Columbia. There's also discussions in the state of Washington, and Canada has expressed interest on a federal level of an Lcfs program. In terms of political risk under the Trump administration, I honestly think it's low because the ethanol industry has been a big supporter of Trump, and this is a big one of their biggest regulations that ensures development and growth of ethanol consumption. There is an oil industry lobby for revamping the RFS program led by Carl Icahn, Valero, some other independent oil refiners, but it's more of a modification of the program. It's not elimination of the program. So that's what's going on. So for more information, I suggest if you want to learn more, go to the EPA RFS or the CARB LCFS websites. They're full of information. For ethanol, you can look at the Renewable Fuels Association. For biodiesel, the National Biodiesel Board. For renewable natural gas, the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas has excellent resources in their website. If you want information on RINs and LCFS markets and prices and what's going on with the trade and everything, Argus has a report called the America's Biofuels Report. You can contact them and get a 2-week free trial. And you can contact me for any further questions. So I guess this is the end of my presentation and my slides. And I pass the microphone over to Jeremy to field some questions out there.
Excellent. Thank you, Cynthia. That was fantastic, extremely informative. Thank you for introducing several new acronyms into my lexicon. But I think folks are using the chat function. Just a reminder, use that for posing questions that we'll ask Cynthia to respond to here. I'll just do a quick sample just to remind everyone. If I can learn how to type, there we go. There we go. Not that we'll ask you to respond to that question, Cynthia. And to respond to Garrett, yes, we will download the audio recording and as well as the presentation, and we'll load all of that to our website in the course of the day. And Jacqueline Sanchez will get that out to you via email. And thanks, Jacqueline, for all your help on the webinar today, as always. So, Cynthia, there's a lot of different things, and again, I encourage folks to use the chat function. There's one thing I want to come back to that struck me to make sure I understood you correctly. I mean, there's a variety of things that are very broad, but I want to start with something very specific about advanced biofuels. Because when you laid out where the RFS came from and the George W. Bush administration, advanced biofuels was all the discussion then, but I want to make sure I understood you correctly. So advanced biofuels seem to be underperforming, they're below the target, and is that because technology has not progressed as quickly as estimated? Is that how you explained that? I want to make sure I understood that correctly. And fill in the blanks a little bit if that is actually ever going to realize the potential that we all heard about even at the State of the Union several years ago.
Yeah, I want to make a correction. Advanced biofuels, the definition is more than 50% of GHG reductions. And examples of that are like I mentioned, sugarcane ethanol and other more high technology ethanols and fuels produced. And yes, Jeremy, the answer is there just isn't enough because the technology's there, but the financing, the projects getting off the ground have not, some projects have started and they have not been successful in maintaining production. It's a very I think it's a technical challenge mostly, but also of course, money solves a lot of things. So I think the value of the credits also is an issue. And that's why that's why the EPA manages the targets, because if we were to go by the goals of 5.5, 5.5 for advanced 5.5 billion gallons required, when there isn't that much production, then the credits would be, hugely expensive. And anyways, it would be unable, the refiners and the importers of fuels would be unable to meet their obligation because just there isn't any availability. Cellulosic fuels are 60% or greater. So advanced 50% or greater, and 60% greater GHG reductions.
So let's take that and step back a little bit to a broad question. You went through the volatility of the markets. You talked about some of the state, the LCF in California, LCFS, excuse me, in California. So the big question that we've all been grappling with the last week or so is the Paris Accord and the decision by this administration in the United States to try and remove itself from the Paris Accord. And a lot of the questions that seem to percolate is, what does that mean for U.S. emissions and targets, and sort of where we were in terms of what we committed to under the Paris Accord. And I think you had a chart here that maybe explains a little bit about, even in California, things will continue to move ahead, but just help us understand how important it is at the state level in the United States, despite what may happen in terms of the U.S. administration decision on Paris.
Yes, California is very committed to continuing this program. First of all, in terms of the federal level, what are the threats, for the RFS? Like I mentioned, the ethanol lobby is very much, has been a Trump supporter, and, that's why I don't think there'll be impacts. However, there'll be some impacts regarding Pruitt's announcement of cutting, personnel at the EPA.
Pruitt being the head of the EPA, yeah.
Yes, Pruitt being the head of the EPA, and reducing the staff of the EPA. That will certainly impact the way this program is run. I mean, it's incredible the amount of detail that are involved in managing this program effectively and making sure that the credits are real. There's been many instances of fraudulent RINs being issued because they weren't checked, and this kind of thing. And the EPA, has worked very closely with the industry in developing a system that mitigates those things going forward. So reducing personnel will affect the way that this program runs smoothly, but itself, in terms of an attack directly to this program, I don't think it's likely. California, on the other hand, is continuing. California will continue this program. Governor Brown is very committed to, continuing the commitments that they have made. And as a matter of fact, that steep curve that we saw in terms of California's carbon intensity reductions will get steeper, likely to get steeper, with the implementation of the SB 32 requiring 40% reductions by 2030. So we will continue to see more adoption of biofuels in the future here.
Yeah, and obviously there was a lot of news where Governor Brown was in Beijing this week, and all path, full steam ahead on California's commitment, as you said, under in terms of emissions reduction and carbon decarbonization. So a question, continuing to talk about California, the question here is, Brazil is moving towards an Lcfs model. What lessons from California should they learn? So I think what could be interesting here, we always like to talk about the positive lessons, but what are some of the pratfalls as well, I would suggest could be interesting as Brazil moves, in this case, towards a low carbon fuel standard?
Well, I think the program has been running very well. I mean, I don't think there are a lot of complaints in terms of the management of the program from the oil industry side or from the biofuels producer side. One thing that caused a bit of a havoc last year was the adoption, the models that are used to calculate the carbon intensity were updated. California uses the models that are developed by Argonne Laboratories. It's called the California GREET model. And Argonne, as of course, as we learn more, the models were updated, and so all the carbon intensities of all the fuels had to be recalculated. They called it the GREET Model 2.0 implementation. So that created some havoc in the industry, changing the carbon intensity and those kind of things. So I think that's an important, make sure in Brazil you have a methodology for updating the calculation of the carbon intensity. I think I would say that's one thing, one of the lessons learned, very important lessons learned.
I would wonder, also interesting question, and something you raised about the clean transportation in California has a cost. So, I mean, that's obviously something in developing markets that's extremely important. And so I wonder if that's something, I mean, is that unique? I guess my question would be, is that unique to California to be able to absorb that kind of cost at the pump?
Yeah, I mean, that's why California, has suffered. Some, businesses and people have left our state because, this is part of the reason that, transportation fuels are I think they are the most expensive in the nation, at least in the lower 48. But on the other hand, renewable energy initially is always going to be expensive. I mean, solar electricity at the beginning of its implementation, it cost 4 times what it costs today. And that was only back in 2010. So, in a period of 7-8 years, we have seen quite a bit of a reduction due to efficiencies in producing this. And, the similar trend could happen with biofuels, where little by little, the production cost will go down and become more efficient, and therefore won't be as high cost to the consumer.
Yeah, I think it's always one of the criticisms you hear about not just renewable fuels, but California's forward-leaning posture on renewables in general and air quality is can that be done without jeopardizing economic development and continuing to, like you said, attract, retain investors, companies, employers, etc. So here's another question from Luis about tariffs. Not sure if you're aware of sort of the latest. I mean, you talked about some of the issues with Argentina, but a potential tariff that Brazil is discussing on U.S. ethanol due to its carbon intensity, and you laid out very nicely the difference between U.S. corn ethanol carbon intensity and Brazil sugarcane carbon intensity. So talk a little bit about this potential tariff and also what it would do in terms of if the U.S. retaliates, what impact that may have.
Yeah, that could have an impact regarding the sugarcane imports into California for sure. I think that would be a shame to impose these tariffs, because I think ethanol Brazil and the U.S. are the largest ethanol producers in the world. And, I think they have some complementary measures and perspectives. So, the U.S. ethanol does help out in Brazil in terms of the cost of ethanol in Brazil when sugar prices are expensive, and Brazil benefits from exporting more sugar. So I don't know. I think it will impact if there is such a tariff. It could impact imports into California. But I think that the fact that the incentives, I would have to see how much the tariffs are versus the incentives. That's the key. That's the key. So.
Yeah, you mentioned very clearly the role of incentives here. So, if anyone has any final questions, we'll try and wrap up here. Any final thoughts? Ask folks to submit those. I had something I was thinking about as you presented and walked us through all the various discussions of the and understanding of the fuels and what sort of makes up the broader basket of renewable fuels and the difference between California and the U.S. So my question, sort of an unfair question, but my question to you would be, which of these fuels is going to be the most important? I mean, we see in some of your pie charts where they are today, but in a 5 to 10 year horizon, what's the most important renewable fuel?
Right. Okay, that's a great question. So we have seen great adoption, as I mentioned, of RNG. That has, just boomed in California. But as of today, I believe that about 90% of all CNG and LNG transportation is being met by biogas, by RNG. So so then the question becomes, is the CNG and LNG transportation sector going to grow? And what is it going to take for the CNG and LNG sectors to grow? Well, at lower oil prices, the growth is difficult because it requires a conversion of the engines, and those are expensive. And unless you can see a future where diesel prices are a lot more expensive than natural gas prices, then it makes it economically feasible to convert the engines. However, I do want to make an important point regarding California. California has zero emission vehicle targets also. So as I mentioned, companies like Cummins and others, Westport, they're developing, basically they're called near zero emission engines if they're powered by RNG. So it is likely that we may see some conversion of trucking, and there are other incentives that California is offering the trucking industry to convert in that direction. So the growth of RNG, the production, I think, will grow significantly, but is the demand in CNG and LNG going to be there? And that's going to be a hurdle for the growth of that fuel. Renewable diesel will continue to come into the United States as it is, as the arbitrage is open, meaning the cost, the amount that U.S. companies can pay for that makes it worth it for them to come. So there's plenty of renewable diesel being produced abroad, and there are plants developing, production plants developing in the United States. Regarding biodiesel, also, I think there's a lot of growth, and I think we'll continue to see growth in that sector. And the same with ethanol. I do want to mention that in California, there's a lot of growth in E85 sales. There's continue to grow little by little. There are some stations you can pull in here and fuel 85% ethanol. If your vehicle is a flex fuel vehicle, you can fuel in these stations. And as gasoline taxes increase in California, then the E85 price is lower relative. So it incentivizes consumers to purchase those kinds of vehicles. And then I don't want to leave out electric vehicles. I think EVs are, it's something that continues to be adopted here in California. California has made a big commitment to electric vehicles. Utilities manage the Lcfs credit. The utilities, estimate how many vehicles are deployed in their territory. Estimate vehicles deployed, and so we will see growth. But there's a lot of also production hurdles, in terms of being able to meet the demand in California. I hear there's great waiting list to get a new Tesla or another kind of vehicle, electric vehicle. And I don't want to leave out hydrogen also. That's a new technology, and Toyota just came out with their new hydrogen vehicle. There's one station here in San Diego where you can fuel, and it apparently is good for, I think it's 500 miles. So could be an attractive solution.
So all of them.
Yes, I think all of them. Yes.
No, I think no, that's very interesting. I mean, well, thank you so much, Cynthia. We're almost out of time, and I wanted to ask a final question. And as I've come to like to do, and folks who participated in La Jolla Conference and other panels we've done know, I always like to wrap up with a yes or no question. So here's a yes or no question that hopefully encapsulates a lot of what we talked about today. Does the Trump administration's decision to pull out of the Paris Accord impact renewable fuels? And you can take that whether it means emissions, whether it means production, emissions reduction. That is. So the question, yes or no, is does the decision to pull out of the Paris Agreement by the United States administration impact renewable fuels negatively, or impact them? Period.
Yeah, I think the short answer is no. I don't think in the short term it has any impact whatsoever.
Perfect. So that's a wonderful upbeat note to end on. Yeah. And I'll also, thank you very much for a wonderful discussion and presentation. Thank you for everyone online joining us. I think Cynthia left her email, so you can certainly follow up with her. We'll load this on the website, the recording and the presentation, and get that out to you later today, as I mentioned. I also want to make sure you know about one of our upcoming programs in Santiago, Chile, Disruptors in Energy Transition. We probably won't be talking too much about renewable fuels, but instead other disruptors and some of the advances in issues such as storage, distributed generation, data analytics, and some of the things that are occurring, especially in Chile in this case. So thanks everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you either in Chile or down the road in Panama, Brazil, Mexico, or here in La Jolla. Thanks again, Cynthia. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Excellent.